I'm not worried about, the artist in New York and not being good enough and all that stuff. It wasn't really part of my mindset.
Right.
So I think that's what it helps me with ACTEX because I'm not thinking about somebody that's going to have a better invention or somebody's going to. Our whole purpose is to save lives and to make a difference and to solve cultural issues. So, for example, SIDS or prevent uh, concussions and
Mhm.
CTE and anything that has head trauma, such as the NFL, NCAA, our military, and so forth. So it's by being able to take this whole flow because a patent, in essence, is like a painting. Started Organopolis, and I actually have the original, all the paintings that got burned, and the original, and then I have the breakthrough. And here's where it was important.
Don, tell us who you are.
Well, what a fascinating question. I guess as an inventor, I would say, how would I make a prototype of myself? Okay. So it's a collective of my father being a world class artist and being in his world, my grandmother being a global thinker, of being in the White House with my grandfather, of being a painter, being mentored by a leading authority in its concentric gestalt perception, which had a tremendous effect on me, to Hollywood and being able to deal with things from a art director, it's a set designer, different special effects. So if you put all those collectives together, and if I were to do it like one of my inventions, then I would say that it's very fascinating in that each one of the different chapters of my life, if you put them into a collective, that would be a start. But it's not complete until you have a spiritual connection with our Creator. So, as I'm trying to be able to follow a path and the purpose in which He designed me for and the people that are around me, then that's where it starts to all come together. Interesting enough, what my doctorate in organizational leadership enables me to see that a little bit clearer because it's a social science and I can be able to understand or be able to have my heart in sharing with my team self motivation, a purpose, what we're trying to do to make a difference in this life. So, as we are a collective, I think that those are the elements individually and from a standpoint of an entity or our company, Actex.
Do you think, I think it's a privilege for anyone to really understand why we're on this earth, right?
Yes, yes.
Um, you said a lot there.
Okay,
There's a lot of different things,
yes.
right? Do you feel, or at what point do you feel like you start to follow your life's purpose?
We're right on the stepping stone right now. All the vision is there.
Mm.
All of the experts that we need to be able to move forward is there. All of the belief, engagement is there. Uh, by being on the doorsteps, we just need gas in the tank, which we're really close to. Um, Working with a number of different investor potentials, but it's also a culture carry forward with the investors. So what I'm discussing with our potential, well, it's actually a partnership. I mean, we've got to a first base. So right now, it's a matter of just being able to formalize, engage, and be able to pull the resources that we need to move forward. So
Okay.
we're close.
All right. We're going to come back to some of the cool things that you guys in ACSEC have been working on, but I want to be able to understand how we got to where we are. And one way that can help me to do that is to be able to understand all the influences in your life.
Yes, yes, yes.
So take me back a little bit to where you grew up.
Well, grew up in Marion, Ohio, and it's a very interesting situation because Marion is a relatively small city,
Hmm.
but my dad was part of a group that was beatniks, basically. Bob Fees built a lending strip, and it was a collective of just outstanding artists, and all the clients were primarily from New York or from Chicago.
What's a beatnik?
A beatnik is somebody that has an Austin Healey 3000 and likes
Okay.
to just, when they're working, be able to just be cool and,
Okay.
you know, throw needed erasers at each other or.
Okay. Haven't heard that term before. So,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
All right.
So in other words, imagine a studio environment
Mhm.
where there's just a lot of fun, and what it is you're setting up an environment that enables the creativity and the collective of the talent to be able to start to form and make things. So,
Okay. So you feel that maybe some of that engineering mindset has been influenced from your dad. That's where
that was the
engineering-
starting part because I was with him in the studio all the time, and
Okay.
that's when you had Polaroid cameras. So he did a lot of full page illustrations, you know, for like, you know, newspapers, magazines, this, that, and that. So I was a model for a lot of it. Okay,
You're the
this
stand-in.
goofy looking kid.
Okay.
So I saw the whole process,
Okay.
and I remember, gosh, when he was doing the illustrations, he got to the point where I was trying, that I need to get back to, is that you don't think about it anymore. I mean, his talent was direct, like a
Mhm.
sax player. You
Mhm.
don't think about where your fingers are going when you get really good. So, yeah, my dad. And then when it got to be, well, at Ohio State, I was going to be a doctor and a cancer researcher because of the tragic death of my father. But my grandmother convinced me to be an artist. And wow,
Your grandmother convinced you to be an artist.
she was amazing. Yes, yes.
Okay. And what was your grandmother's background? Where did that come
Well, she was quite privileged because my grandfather gave her a dream world.
Oh, yeah?
My grandfather started off with a small newspaper in Little Switzerland, Ohio. It's a very hilly section in southeast Ohio, small town.
Mhm.
Woodruff, I think, is where I tried to be able to look up some records.
Mhm.
So that grew to being able to, you know, be president of the Ohio Newspaper Association, and then he was President Hardy's campaign manager. President Hardy then invited him to the White House, and the rest of their years was in the White House. So from her standpoint, she was a very talented painter. There was
Okay.
at least 36 of her paintings that was in a large house, our house here in Columbus off of Kenny Road. She was pretty radical. She painted the house pink and
Okay.
had lavender shutters because the exact tone of the lavender shutters was exactly the same tone as shadows of trees on the house.
Mhm.
So it was just a beautiful, very unusual. And there was formal English gardens, the 3 formal English gardens in the property. So what she, I think, carried forward is I've never been concerned about competition. And so I think in seeing her world, and I mean, she had the Columbus Art League come out, Columbus Symphony, it came out. She was, um, and so by her being with the women and the men in Washington, D.C., in discussing global issues and art, that's where art was part of that world. So from there, it was my first class at Ohio State in painting, my very first one.
Mhm.
And I was doing this large painting. Yeah, it was my first painting, actually.
What
I
was it
had some
about?
studies.
What was the painting of?
It was an abstract, but I started to, the TA that was teaching the course, Walt Dieter, was an amazing, amazing artist. And he liked it, and he asked, you know, Professor Sherman afterwards, you know, to take a look at it. And Professor Sherman then went to the dean, and they invited me into a meeting. And so they asked me what I thought about this idea. So what they said, well, we're thinking of giving you a graduate studio space, and you would be working individually with the professors in the department. That really opened up the doors because number one, it was a humbling award. So it was one where, well, I better do something with this because it was a vision they had. So
Mhm.
as we worked together, then I was the assistant with Professor Hoyt Sherman, and for 3 years,
Sherman.
and we worked on a book from chiaroscuro to hue, which this is the real key to everything. From chiaroscuro to hue was it was a decomposing study of concentric field perception, and we worked with MIT, and actually it was detected in zone 17 of the visual cortex. So this was perceptual, high level perceptual. It was it from a painting standpoint. Let me try to be able to explain it better.
Yeah.
So
All in layman terms.
okay,
For us.
so if you take a look at a painting,
Right.
and you frame that painting, and the world that you are looking at is within the frame of that painting.
Okay.
So what he taught me was the dynamics and the shift of everything that you do affects everything else. So
Okay.
from a Gestalt perceptual standpoint, whatever you're working on, you concentrate and you get a feel, but then you have to look at it in its entirety. Well, in studying that concentric field, we used Rembrandt, Cezanne, and Degas, and as we studied it, then we mapped out the concentric perception that was detected and their great work, and it was all consistent. So
Okay.
that's what enabled me to be a significant painter in New York. So from that standpoint, see, that's an internal part of, look, I'm not worried about, the artist in New York and not being good enough and all that stuff. It wasn't really part of my mindset.
Right.
So I think it helps me with ACTEX, because I'm not thinking about somebody that's going to have a better invention, or our whole purpose is to save lives and to make a difference and to solve cultural issues. So for example, SIDS, or one of the patents is SIDS. Another patent is to prevent, that's a nice cut, prevent concussions and CTE in anything that has head trauma, such as the NFL, NCAA, our military, and so forth. So it's by being able to take this whole flow, because a patent, in essence, is like a painting. So the visualization of the patent is the same kind of visualization that you do in an abstract work. And the fascinating thing about it is that as you train your mind, it's not a linear thing that you are logically seeing a path to. What makes it so fascinating, and that's where my spiritual part comes in, is that ideas comes in snaps. So if I'm working on a problem, it may not be that, okay, my awareness in mechanics or engineering or this, that, or the other is going to lead me to that. What's interesting is it's a visualization of how to solve that problem. Okay?
Okay. So
Does that make sense?
we're going to make more sense of it.
Okay.
It does make sense to a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
And my question for you is, you work with other inventors,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have a core set of people at AXTEC that you work with. How many of them? No?
No, I'm the only inventor.
You're the only inventor on there.
That's correct.
Oh, okay. So have you worked with other inventors and in any other capacity, or?
No, what I did is I built a team around the inventions that I'm working on.
Okay.
So the vision is, I will in the future, in our prototype area, I'm going to be a mentor and have several mentees to carry forward the concept of the company. So
Okay.
so I don't forget it, and so it's important here. What it is sustainable inventions. So it's sustainable. So in other words, the company is built on generating patents and licensing patents. It's not focused on patents and manufacturing and sales and so forth. It's
Okay.
really only focusing in on being able to have the patents, be able to do the prototypes, the proof of concept, and to be able then to ground that into companies, the best companies in the world that does what they do. So
Okay.
that's it. So
So
in other words, I will be mentoring,
you'll be
and I
mentoring
have to
others.
think of the company like my son, for example.
Right.
Everybody on the board thinks my son would be somebody that I can train to be able to continue my role 20, 30 years from now.
Well, no, that's pretty good. Um, Handing down your legacy to your offspring in that sense.
Yes.
Um, I have a question about art. I have a
Sure.
question about the artist,
Sure.
you in that sense, right? You mentioned art. You mentioned about your mentor Sherman, right?
Quite charming.
And so a lot of people in the art world, I'm sure, would know who
He's
he is.
incredible. Yes.
And but someone like myself,
Has not.
no idea who he is. So I guess my question here would be one, um, with your with this gentleman mentoring you,
Mm-hmm.
right, influencing a lot of what you're doing,
Mm-hmm.
and then you taking, if I understand this correctly, you're taking your art concepts and you're bringing that into your engineering side, and it's almost like you're making this full circle of 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 your creations in a sense, right? Using
That's
both
right.
your art and
That's
technology
right.
and combining them.
That's right.
Um,
It all starts with the
mhm,
visualization.
okay,
So it's the mind figuring out the visualization. So you're
okay.
exactly right.
How much in your experience? How many not inventors that worked with you? Because you said there's none that work with you. You have a different team set up, but from your understanding, how common is that in terms of
Ah,
the process? Because I haven't really heard it that way.
I couldn't
Um,
really answer that question because there's so many brilliant, like Paul Allen with Microsoft. When
mhm,
I first had my division for my main core patent,
mhm,
then my patent attorney told me, well, you have a challenge on our provisional. And the challenge was from Paul Allen with Microsoft. So Microsoft challenged,
mhm.
saying that they had the intellectual property before I did, and he actually filed his patent 6 weeks before I did. So
Okay.
I thought, oh, for heaven's sakes, I can't.
Hmm.
I might as well forget about it because this is Microsoft. I can't stand against Microsoft. Well, I
Hmm.
studied his patent and it was
Mhm.
brilliant, absolutely brilliant. He was the owner of the Seattle Seahawks, so it gave him a knowledge of the game, okay? And his concept was basically airbags to be able to deflect the energy to protect the head. And then it had software that would be able to re-inflate those airbags as in the game. This one would be deflated, this would be inflate. It was wonderful. The reason I won was because his it was a reactionary solution, where
Mhm.
mine was a pre-anticipatory.
Hmm.
And to me, the only way to solve the problem for the NFL or Formula One racing or for fighter jets and so forth, it has to be able to pre-anticipate the event before it occurs, or you're not going to be able to address the threat and be able to protect the brain or the body.
Okay. What how do you go about choosing what your focus would be in terms of I'm going to invent this particular thing? Has something traumatic happened in your life, or maybe not traumatic? And I've shared with you before that I invented something
Yes,
to,
that
to
was
patent
fascinating. Yes,
with attraction, but that came about because I was trying to solve a
you
problem
got it.
that I was just dealing with.
That's what it is.
Is that
You just said it. So
okay?
here's the situation.
Hmm.
When nobody was solving the problem for CTE when it came out, and you see the film Concussion with
Hmm.
Will
Will
Smith,
Smith,
which
yeah.
was a wonderful film,
Hmm.
then I thought, because what I did before, I had an exoskeleton concept when I was in Hollywood. And
Hmm.
the reason why is that I got a really cool Harley Sportster at the time. And so I started writing with, it was a Harley dealership there, Bartels, I think it was, Bartels Harley Davidson.
Hmm.
They're globally renowned, really cool guys, and so they would ride, and they invited me to start riding with them on the weekends.
Okay.
And so I was riding with some people that like Mickey Rourke, for example.
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Nice.
And so
Mhm.
I started thinking, well, my gosh, it'd be tragic if somebody came out of an alley or somebody, one of the guys that were riding got killed or hurt. So I tried to think of how am I going to protect them, the knees and the hip. And so I came up with this exoskeleton concept that was pre-anticipatory. And what it basically is, the components were high density foam, and there was very small tubes that were part of a whole suit outfit. And inside of the foam were cavities and valves that would magnify the pressure that would come into the knee in sensing before the impact. So in other words, here's the knee, and here's a car coming. So the system could be able to identify this car and to be able to pressurize and start the system at 120 to 130% of its capacity. And before it actually occurred, then the inflation would come into these chambers. They would magnify the pressure to have enough of a counter to be able to address the threat of whatever's happening. So that's what started the whole thing. So with the exoskeleton. So once the problem of CTE became public, then I said, well, what if I could try to work on that? So I started working on the helmet idea. And
Okay.
that helmet idea it's working with the exoskeleton suit. And so now the patents that I have also includes full body protection, like for the NFL, that's driven by the intelligence of the helmet. So in answer to your question is it's solving a problem.
Okay.
And so SIDS, one of my dear friends, a chiropractor, um, I started thinking about SIDS, and I told him I'm thinking about SIDS, and what do you think about this? And he had it just hit him really hard, uh, and he said, "Well, I lost a baby with SIDS." So I started to see the emotional devastation of families that would lose a baby with SIDS.
Mhm.
So I said, "Well, wait a minute, maybe I can try to figure that out." So we got a really cool patent we're working on that can save babies' lives, both in intensive care and in families' homes. Um, the idea of energy is the idea for Blue River. Blue River is an energy producing concept that utilizes the physics of the ocean that can be able to generate enough power if mined. Having a 24/7, the physics or the activator for the concept is just the pressure of the ocean. So there's no after element in producing energy because the only thing that happens is the ocean water comes out of a large tube and back into the ocean. So see, it solves that problem. So it's like people recovering from strokes. So now I can use those components. It's like if you build an airplane, you've already developed this part of it, like um, Skunk Works. That was a fascinating
Works.
book. It really inspired me a lot, Skunk Works.
Mhm.
So see, then I can use the thought process for people recovering from strokes because the underlying philosophy took all these, except for Blue River, is to see something happen before it occurs and be able to have a plan. That plan, that's the big part, to be able to then have a plan that is proactive, that addresses a threat before it actually occurs. That's the fundamental basis for the patents that I'm working on right now.
Well, and if you were able to accomplish a lot of what you're talking about here, in in what magnitude do you think that this would be able to? Um, how do you think this will be received? Are there competitors to you right now in this
No.
space, or?
Yeah, and it's interesting. Every one of the ones that I've seen that have been, they're trying really hard to solve this problem, and all of them are reactionary. It's diffusing energy in some manner or another. So it's not proactive. The
Okay.
part about the patents now that we have a wonderful position in is my new patents on natural intelligence. Natural intelligence is an abstract idea that is like a step beyond artificial intelligence because when it processes something, it's processing a brand new solution that's never occurred before. And
Okay.
so it's a baby step, because it sees something in a limited amount of time, but in that limited amount of time for the NFL is critical to save a person's life. In a
Right.
limited period of time, it's critical to save a baby's life.
Right.
So now my new patent, which will be issued in, I guess, 2 weeks here from my patent attorney, that includes 10 more claims that is taking the abstract theory of natural intelligence and grounding it into the hardware of the helmet. So now there's 4 major patents on the CT or the helmet. But what's important about that is now natural intelligence has a grounding. It has a position of not just an abstract idea, but how it can be into a situation. So then see the next 6 patents I'm working on works on that same principle. So, and I can build a tree off of natural intelligence and how it can be able to help people and solve problems.
Okay. Um, where does the artist stop and the engineer begin? In all
There's the
this?
beautiful part, the part that it's right in front of us. So for 10 or 11 years, I taught time-based media design, which is basically the students have to write a script and they have to do a storyboard. And as we go through the storyboard, then we do character development and we do the different components that are important in film. So there's film theory. And then we put them into animatics and put soundtracks in or voiceovers and do presentation like you would in the real world of film, okay? So for our team, the next thing I'm going to try to do is really tune up my storyboard skills again. So as storyboard, concept artist, production designer out in Hollywood. So what that does, it's a great visualization tool for the whole team. So as I'm doing these concept renderings, the first part that it applies to is my brilliant patent attorney. I mean, he is brilliant, and I have so much respect for him. Where we are now, I give him a huge amount of credit. Okay, his niche in the world right now is in artificial intelligence as a global expert in artificial intelligence. That's why we got the other 10 claims for my patent. We talked for hours, I explained it to him, I drew a drawing, an illustration, a spiral model. So see, then it gives him a visualization of what I'm doing. It does for the team too. So as I move forward, you know, I can do CAD and I could learn SolidWorks, but what I'm trying to do for the team and to keep things moving forward, we have a huge advantage, is when I come up with an idea, I can draw it out. We can do the provisionals. Then I can direct our SolidWorks artist, like I did when I taught at CCAD, which is one of the leading film schools in media in the world. Okay, that was a great honor. Our staff was amazing. Our students from all over the world was amazing. So what I'm trying to say is that here's how I want to fuel the company. I want to be able to do the storyboards, do the provisionals, work with my patent attorney, have that all put together. Then from those visuals, then I'll direct the SolidWorks so that we can be able to do 3D modeling. Then we can do 3D prototyping. And we have the resources now to be able to do 3D prototyping in the substrate in which it will be. So it enables me to get scientific data. Then we're going to do peer-reviewed articles with me finishing my doctorate soon. Well, I can still do it even as but anyway, the doctors that are part of the team right now, the vision is to do peer-reviewed articles in the medical journals and so forth that shows proof of concept and shows that scientifically we've got this solved. And then from that position, then I'll have another team that then works it through grounding into the people that will manufacture it and then the people that will distribute it. So, and then we keep moving. See what I'm saying? So the idea is keep moving on developing ideas, keep moving on building a different trees off of patents. So that the whole part of the company to me is our prototype center.
Okay, pretty interesting. What would you what would you say would be the most challenging part of all of this right now in the process of all of what you're doing? Where you feel are the roadblocks, the bottlenecks?
Sure. It's a great question. Here's the way it is in my experiences is that I've recruited the right people. I've got a wonderful team. The problem is to be able to get an investor that doesn't want to have a majority of equity into the company because they're saying, show me. I want to see the scientific data. I want to see the prototypes,
I want to see the proof of concept.
proof of concept. Exactly. They're very interested, but they're cautious and they're holding and they're right outside of here. So now my challenge is, well, how am I going to do this? Because I can't self-fund this company anymore. So
Right.
you see what I'm saying? So that's the main
So someone
challenge.
has to take a risk and on there. And in your mind, um, let's just say John Doe comes to you and says, Don, I'll invest $300 million or whatever
Sure.
the figure is, right?
Right.
Let's just say into your your project, one of your inventions,
Yes.
right? How certain are you in your mind that what you're creating is going to work exactly the way that you envisioned it?
Well, here's one of the parts. Then one of the parts is to take a look at what it means to solve the problem.
Okay.
So, for example, in solving CTE, they're going to develop one for motorcycle riders, going to develop a model for bicycle riders, going to develop one for National Guard and for our military, getting huge amounts of positive feedback from the military about the helmet. I mean, they're talking significant amounts of money, $50 million for research and development. Universities have approached the gatekeepers for research and development on the academic world part of things.
Right.
So Ohio State, for example, has $12.6 million of research and development that's sitting on the table. But what I have to do is I have to be able to get to the next step. So the next step that I'm visualizing, because I don't have the money to do the complete scientific data, so forth, but what I'm doing is my new partner can do SolidWorks drawings. He's very skilled at that, and he has contracts out doing actual product with his 3D printing. So we're going to 3D print the components, and then the vision I have is to be able to then have these components. They're separate. I'll have, like for example, I'll have a helmet that's cut in half, and I can show what it is inside the helmet. Over here, I can take one of the pistons or the high pressure valve that's large. So then I'm going to film that. So I'll have a 3-camera shoot, and I got a buddy that'll do a handheld. What I'm going to do is explain how it works and have a whiteboard behind me to show how it works. And then that's that one step. The next step, a friend of mine he's a retired dean of the media department, Ron Sachs. He's an amazing guy. He had a history in Los Angeles. We're going to do 2 sizzle reels, and they're going to be complete animation.
Okay.
And just our relationship, he believes in it so much that, I mean, this is amazing. It's only $150,000. I don't care if I say that, but nobody could do that for $150,000. It's because he believes in the product. So I can do the storyboards for it. We're going to use LA animators. Then people can see the animation, how it works. Here comes the helmet. Then you come in tight. All right, this is the natural intelligence processing. And here it comes, okay, then the system is fully energized. Then all of a sudden it isolates one of the high pressure valves, and here it comes, and it solves, it approaches being able to have the best plan to deal with the threat before you actually get hit, okay? So what I have to do is be able to get to that next step, build my website so it's stronger. I want to do a PowerPoint, so a PowerPoint for presenting to the NFL. So I just need, that's where my plans are right now. If we get to that point, then we'll see what happens. I have already recruited people on the backside of the NFL. Kirk Dixon's on my board. He's president of NFL Films, major, just a great guy. He deals with NFL players that have retired and very supportive into the fact of their CTE and how it's going to kill them. The last I heard was 96% of the people that play in the NFL are going to have CTE. CTE is insidious. If you've seen the film
Yeah.
Concussion, protein actually comes into the brain and eats the brain cells. So you lose all identity of who you are, and you die.
Is that well? I'm assuming like boxers and people with any sort of head traumas. Um, you can't really help boxers because they're not.
No,
Um,
I could do a thin, it would be a thinner, like for example, soccer. I'm trying to work on a concept that is much smaller that can be able to help people in soccer. But
you were talking about I think with the spine, right? Because
that's right.
you had spine surgery.
Oh yeah, this is my most
Um,
exciting idea, actually. I think.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay.
In the most layman way that you can, because most of us, you know, may not be engineers that would understand some of the
Sure.
concepts. So in the most layman way.
Got it. Let me start at it from an experiential point of view. I was in the house by myself, and I couldn't get up. I couldn't move. Every time I wanted to get up, oh my God, oh, it was horrible.
No, that's me every morning.
So I had to call 911.
Right.
So when they came, they gave me, the shot, and after it took 3 shots of whatever they were doing, I still couldn't get up. So one of the young guys on 911 said, well, why don't we strap him on a board and just carry him out the window? And so that's what they did. I'm sitting there, oh my God. So they
Out the window.
Yeah, out the window.
Was it the ground floor or
It was ground floor, but I'm
Okay.
still wiggling and I can't see down there. And they go, hey, we got you. And I go, well, I sure hope so.
Right.
So, but I get to the hospital. Oh, it was like 3 days. 3 days, I still couldn't move. And
Wow.
so the surgeon comes in who is on the same team. Dr. Herzog did my first surgery. And what was so amazing about that is Dr. Triffin is on my team. He's a very recognized orthopedic surgeon. I told him about what was going on, and he said, well, there's only 2 surgeons I could recommend, Dr. Herzog, which is on their team, and a surgeon that's in Washington, D.C. It was pretty horrific. I had caught a fellow that was falling in Home Depot, and my reaction was, as he was falling, he was coming down head first, and as he was falling, I reacted fast enough to get my arm under the back shoulder of his head, and I lunged up with as much strength as I could, and I kept him from hitting his head on this steel shelf. Then I banged into the shelf.
You saved a life.
Yeah, and Dr. Herzog showed me the extra. Oh my God! He said, I know they have centimeters, but I said, well, how wide is that? He goes, well, it's over half an inch. So the vertebra was kicked out of position over half an inch.
Well, surprised you're able to walk after
exactly.
that. Yeah.
So he said, I'm really not going to be able to get this all the way done, so I'll just do the best I can. Well, because of the introduction of Triffin and our talk and so forth before, and I showed him Actex. When I saw what he did, he pulled that back of the spine, which is towards your internal part of your body, not the external part. He pulled that back into perfect alignment. Every screw was in the perfect position. I knew what I was looking at. He did an amazing job, okay? So when this was happening after I'd recovered from that surgery. And so another guy, I can't remember his name right now, when he came in, then he knew Herzog, they're on the same team. And so he says, well, you're going to need back surgery. And I go, oh, not again. Right. And so what he was showing me that my next vertebra is on an angle. And he says, well, it happens, all the time. If you have the surgery out of 3/4, then 5/6 is usually it wiggles. And then that creates a real problem because the spine starts to curve. And so I started thinking, how am I going to solve this problem? Okay, so anyway, I came up with this vision of making a biomolecular flexible stabilization device. And so here's the idea in layman terms. It has 80 different torsion bars, but without getting complicated about it. What it is it means that each one of the torsion bars can be prescribed by the surgeon to have a different amount of elastomers and flexibility and positions into it so that it emulates a person's age, lifestyle, what they need. So the idea is, in simple terms, when they have that surgery, they'll still have the natural flexibility that God gave them to begin with, not having a fixed another piece of titanium or, you know. And the nice thing about that is it solves the problem. So as you fuse these biomolecular tension elements into a unit, then it also solves what the doctor needs to solve, such as a wedge to be able to create the vertebra to be realigned. See what I'm saying? So I'm excited about that. And there's another reason why you asked me that question, how do I know it's going to work? Is because my doctorate is one of building companies. It's the idea of looking at your environment, your business environment, where your position is, so it would be first in terms of market share. I have in mind a company that there's a fellow on my board, Quentin, who his cousin, I think it was, got hired by spine. They do a huge, I don't know what it is, 85, 90% of the fixed stabilization devices in California. So this is how the idea works. Because of where they are at, then I want to approach them and license, work together in terms of dealing with the final product, okay? Then they already have the distribution channels. They already have all the different surgeons that need this. So you see how I'm thinking for the investor. Right. So the investor that's going to risk this, he should know that the vision is already in place for what the potential is. Like solving the concussions is the huge market for bicycles and motorcycles. I was surprised. There's I forget what it is. It's something like, well, I can't. It's in the hundreds of thousands of motorcycles. It's in the United States as well as in Europe, and it's that much more than I thought. Okay, and then you take a look at the bicycles in Europe and in China. So from a global market standpoint, that's what's protecting an investor.
Yeah, well, I can totally see how needed. I mean, even just bicycle accidents. I recall a cousin of mine's son had rode his bicycle into a tree. Oh! But you would figure that big deal, right? Because I rode my bicycle into many different things, but he busted spleens and all sorts of things, hospitalized. I mean, it was might as well got hit by a Mack truck, right? There was so much going on.
Yes, of course. Yes,
just on a bicycle and a tree. Hey, folks, the tree always wins every time. So so I can see how and I think that being preemptive on impact that you were talking about, that would have to be a game changer. One of my areas, it's like I think about, as an aviator, there's always these general aviation accidents. There's tons and tons and tons of them, and it seems to be increasing more because more people are flying and taking more risks. And a lot of the time, the fatalities because trauma, right? Blunt force trauma. And I always wonder, like, why can't they make things better in a way like how they do with the NASCARs, right? I mean, I will see a car go around a track and smash into the wall, fly through the air, rip through, blow up and explode, and then
they walk away.
They walk out of it.
They walk away. It's because of the cage. It's the design of the inner structure of the car, exactly. Yeah. Like for one, all right, I'm going to just throw this idea out there, so whoever wants to steal it, that's fine. So I just had this idea that basically on commercial airlines, if you think, what bothers me when I fly is the fact that, hey, if these engines go down, we're going down. Right. Okay? So why not just have on the top of the fuselage doors that would open up, like the shuttle, and then what you'd have is you'd have on the side of the fuselage, you would have windbreaks that would come up. They would eject the wings, just throw the wings off.
Mm.
Then all of a sudden you've got these parachutes, and here's this tragedy with the fuselage just softly coming to the earth.
Yeah.
Well, you don't have to kill people. So,
I've actually seen that. Now.
really?
So
That's the first time I
there's a
told you about
conceptual,
this.
there's
So,
a conceptual design, but it's good that you're thinking in the same ways. That I don't remember if it was AOPA or which one of the organizations, but they are looking at something like that,
really?
where the pilots don't look like they get a good end of the deal from how it separates, but at least all the passengers come down in this tube,
Yeah.
and the rest of the aircraft falls away with the parachutes.
Well, that was my idea
Yeah.
10
Well,
years
yes.
ago. So
10 years. Hey,
well, it's nice to know that they're doing it. I'm just happy that it could
no,
save lives.
it's designs being presented. So they're just still sketching drawings. I don't know which companies decide like, hey, that's actually going to work or not. But that's precisely, except for jettison the wings, like everything just falls away, and all all the passenger area, not including the cockpit though.
Yeah, we need to kill
falls
the
away.
pilots. It was
You
their
know
fault
what
in
I
the first place.
mean? So, but I'm sure they'll improve upon that, right?
Yes.
But because that would be a game changer. I mean, just like Cirrus aircraft, they now have parachutes on their aircrafts, and that has killed both as well as saved lives. It saved more than it has killed, because some people become too reliable on it, and it becomes a problem.
Well, one of the problems is you really don't need a parachute. Just have a chute. Why do you need a pair of chutes?
Okay. Okay, Don. Well, oh my God. So, so tell me this. Um, in some of our earlier conversations, we were talking about about film
Oh, yeah.
and cars
Oh, yeah.
and your um, you know your
Love of
involvement
cars.
with the love of engineering and building these fast race cars and stuff like that. Um, what are you planning on doing anything more in that? I know that
Yes.
you have, other than your film that
Yes.
you're looking to do.
Well, I'm very excited. I mean, I've been dreaming of that for, I don't know, 10, 12 years, but I have a Z06 Corvette that
Z6,
Z06, the
Z06.
top of the line back, but it was custom ordered with um, Coughlin. I have a Corvette Z06, but that's just to be able to continue the lineage of what my life was about. So I had a Z28 when I was 16. I had that. My dad had an Austin Healey. He told my mom to sell the Austin Healey because he said Don's going to get killed in it. It's too fast. So I got a Z28 instead.
How much horsepower was in that
Well, the
Austin Healey?
Z28 was like the major toy of all time because it handled and it braked. It was more than the muscle car, and it screamed. It was a little 302, and it became very, very famous. I with that's what got me all the way into it because in the film Viscosity that I was showed, well, look at this.
They're your buddies now,
Oh
aren't they?
my gosh.
So Don, we were just talking about your work also in film, and I know you taught in film as well, right?
That's right.
You also worked as a production designer and
Art director.
and
and so
as an
forth.
art director, and so I can see how a lot of all of that plays into different aspects of design and your creativity, and being an inventor. But one of your passion projects is Viscosity,
Yes.
which I've read,
Mhm.
and loved the story flow in that. It feels autobiographical
It is.
in many ways. Tell tell the audience a little bit about that, if you had an
Sure.
elevator pitch on it.
Well, it came from inception when I was partners with Frank Darabont in Hollywood. We were partners for some time. Very talented. He was a director and writer of Shawshank Redemption and also won the Academy Award for The Green Mile. And so
Well,
what I was talking to Frank about was why not leverage the focus on the art of the filmmaker? Okay,
mhm,
so instead of taking a look at box office formulas, take a look at how you can be able to make a personal statement as an artist, but at the same time be aware of what's going to be successful for the big screen. So when I started thinking about this, I was thinking about my own experiences. So when I was 16, well before that, the film opens up with me and my dad and his Austin Healey going down 315. And
mhm,
so the neat thing was, my dad was a P-51 pilot and a world-class athlete and more than a world-class artist, okay? So
mhm.
when it was just him and me, without mom knowing about it, the little Healy would do
Mhm.
about 140, okay? And
Wow.
with the top down, it
Mhm,
was pretty exhilarating. So that's how it starts out. And then he told mom before he died, sell that Healy, because Don will kill himself in it. But I ended up getting a 1968 Z28, which was a whole lot more horsepower and
mhm,
fun. And so that Z28 was a pretty famous car. Uh,
mhm,
and the reason being is that it was more than just going straight. It was a car that was set up for handling. The brake with the E series tires, you could put it into four-wheel drift or power drift. So to be able to learn the skills of being able to push the car to where it could be maximum wise.
mhm,
You could feel it in the seat of your pants. And so, if you're going to be a good race driver, you got to just feel it. And so, there was an issue that I had that was very significant because I really loved my dad and our family loved him, but in the last, he was only given 6 weeks to live, and he lived 2.5 years in the most painful cancer that you could possibly imagine. Six major operations at the Mayo Clinic in New York, a couple major operations here at Ohio State, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So the whole thing was my dad didn't really believe in God, but he believed in nature. So during that time, those 2.5 years, he moved his drawing table into the house, and every opportunity that he had, we were together. So we would make models, a lot of models, and flying airplanes. But more, what I really respected him for was when we sit on a porch in a storm, he wanted to feel the energy and all that. And then he just
mhm,
said, "Look, oh, son, I'm not going to make it, all right? And so I've got to teach you everything that I can before I go, because you're going to have to be the head of the family." So that took on a whole more serious role.
mhm,
So viscosity starts off with me still answering the same question: God, why did you take my father?
mhm,
Why wouldn't you let him, a man that had so much to contribute, amazing artist? I mean, I've seen a lot of artists in my time,
mhm,
but Dad's skill was incredible. When he knew that he wasn't going to live, he started just opening it up, and he started to just get really radical. He would use violets and oranges into face uh, portraits. The portraits were like one of the ones I saw was this truck in this radiant, radiant sunset, and he used a palette knife and just nailed it. Energy.
mhm,
So that had an effect on me.
mhm,
So what had ended up happening was I would go out in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning,
mhm,
and I would push that Z28. I didn't leave it stock. I put headers on it and CC'd the chambers and did a lot of little tweak stuff, and that little thing would scream. It was a beautiful little car. I I,
mhm,
I got it up to 180 something down the straightaway down 315, and then every single curve. I thought
mhm,
about it and would hit it at the right entry to the curve and the power drift out of the curve,
mhm.
and all those little skills. But the skills were such that I would be talking to God about it. I would say, "Look, I haven't done anything. I'm just a kid. So take my life. I don't care." Zoom,
So you were being reckless, you think,
Oh,
maybe
absolutely.
so?
It's putting it on the edge. And so the point was that I had offers to race professionally, but that's because I could take it that extra little step that most people wouldn't do. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So viscosity is about that at first. But what it gets into is the message of the artist that's making the film. And the message is that anything that is something that captures your attention is your personal art. If you're on a balcony in Manhattan and you got a bunch of little plants here, but what you do is you understand the pH of this dirt, and this plant needs this, and this plant needs this, and this plant needs this, then this is your art, okay? So the whole idea of when you include art into your life, it's enriching your life. So when the message in the film, from a director's standpoint of what I'm trying to say as an artist, changing the framework. So what you're doing is you're being able to open up the ability of the artist, the filmmaker, because you're understanding what the expectations of the film is for market.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're capturing that, which in viscosity, I'm capturing the big screen because it's a period of time when the hottest rock and roll bar era was. So there's Led Zeppelin playing, there's just kick-ass music, and there's super exciting street racing, and there's a love story, and there's challenges, very serious
story of
challenges,
mentorship in there as well.
yeah, mentorship, and mentorship was very important because Sherman in there I put Sherman and the character in the film that represented the Sherman in my painting career.
Right.
So so the Sherman in the film not only was a nationally known race engine, street engine builder, the other side of his barn was these huge sculptures that were incredible. Okay, so it was an artist mentor, car mentors. That's how I tied it together. So the car at the time, then I had a Copa, which is 427 Camaro, and that was a '69. And that car now is iconic. Okay, they only made 200 of them. Their last one sold for over 425,000. A friend of mine told me. Um, and so I converted the Copa into a road race car. Um, and in doing so, there was a lot of things that had to change. So the film was about all the suspension modifications and aluminum heads on the car and making it so that it had better weight distribution, all those little things. So the point is that it was when we were together, Sherman and I, in the garage, and the cars were there. There's the idea of letting the art live. So, for example, taking a look at some of the suspension components, I would just study them and take a look at the physics of it. And so, how could I make it better? How could I make it so that I can adjust them for different situations and so forth? So the car became, in the intention of that was that the car was a sculpture, not a car.
Not a car.
Okay. And then
The car was a sculpture.
That's right. And so there then is the interaction of the car is like a painting. So everything about it, the aesthetics, the shape, taking the front bumper off was so cool because the front had such beautiful aesthetics about it, and so on and so forth. So as the part when I was in New York, I really appreciated dance, and I did a lot of backdrops and stuff for the opera and the dance. When I had my studios here, I would work with them, and we'd do really cool backdrops or build really cool things from the stuff that I had learned in Hollywood. Plus, I had the largest studio that was in the Buggy Works, so we could do a lot of things, and. The idea then that I think is really important is love. So the story is a beautiful romantic story, and it's going to be much more so than what it is right now from what you read. I want to emphasize that and pull the power of it out. So there's a very long climax scene in the film, which I thought would be interesting for the screen. So I designed it so that there was a long race with a lot of money on the line, with mafia that was
Involved with it.
yeah. So they hired the rookie NASA driver that was a hotshot kid, put it into a Shelby Mustang, and here's my Camaro, And so it was enough money that we bought off the sheriffs and police. And we had helicopters to block the roads so that, we could do this race.
Right.
And so they're doing okay in the race. And here's where the whole key of the film is when it got down to the backstretch at 3:15, and that's where I used to practice. So I should have had a major advantage. However, I started losing. And the reason I started losing, here's Sherman up in the helicopter. Then I was thinking of Donna, okay? And for the first time, instead of me not worrying about God taking my life,
Right.
I was thinking of the love that we had and how painful it would be if I got killed, okay? So the love carried outside of me into a concern for another person. And that was real powerful to me in the film. So it took a lot of mustering to reorient that, to say, okay, babe, I'm going to do this for you. So, at the very end, I got it back together.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. An interesting turn in the story, and then bringing it back there in the third act. I thought I like that.
Thank you.
I thought that was pretty powerful inside.
Thank you.
That'd be great to see that.
Well, you
I
know
can
what?
Totally see that on
I'm
the
not
big
going to do
screen,
it unless you direct it.
Well, hey,
I'll tell you right now, it's official. We're not going to make the film unless
All
you
right,
direct it.
You guys heard it here, right?
That's right.
I'm on the line for that one now, but no, it has all the tropes of a great story and a wonderful flow to it, and so I hope we can get it made. Yes, that'd be wonderful.
Yes,
if we can do that. Tell me a little bit about, I mean, you mentioned about your dad and the tragedy of that relationship in a sense towards the end when he turns around and he needs to have you now take the reins of the family. What was going on with the rest of the family, that dynamic?
Well, my mother had a tremendous reaction to that, and I give her so much credit. It's pretty awesome. We bought a Ram Air GTO. And so when we were taking the test drive, I told that salesman, hey, don't tell her much about this. So she said, oh, it's because sporty. It's a nice 4-speed. Well, she didn't know it was a Ram Air GTO.
Right.
So that sucker was amazing. We took it everywhere. So
Right.
we went up into Canada with my dear brother, and she always liked it when I'd blow off a Mustang, And then when she was driving, I told her how to race.
So Mom was enabling you.
Yes.
Is that how Mom got with Dad because of fast cars?
Yeah.
Like
at the high school, the principal was getting all upset about me, sliding into the parking lot sideways and stuff. And so he was going to expel me. So he called my mom and asked her to come over. So she comes over in the GTO. A lot of the kids in the high school was out there. And they go, show him, Mrs. Martin. So he's coming out to talk to her. And she pulls a whole shot. And I got the Camaro. And he never bothered me again.
That's cool. That is funny. Wow. And,
So she was amazing.
Right.
And so she wanted to take the pain and change it into, okay, kids, you're my life now. I want to have some nice memories, and she was just amazing. Yeah. And she always, every time I did a piece of artwork, no matter what time of the day, sometimes it'd be 4 o'clock in the morning or whatever, she wanted to see it before I sent it out. So a lot of times, I had a Carrera back then. I had a problem of procrastinating if it was a major commission. It would be like 100 miles an hour in the last hour, get in the Porsche and rush it to the airport. So many times I just made it by 5 minutes, Well, I never did get over that problem, but they loved the work.
Well, answer me this as an artist. When you guys talk about abstract art, and I know you mentioned, is it Rembrandt, right? And that's probably the only one that I know. And
Goya's woodcuts were amazing.
Goya.
Yeah. And Cezanne, but go ahead.
Well, the Ram
Rembrandt.
Rembrandt, right? More to do with light and shadows, right, and that type of thing,
No,
right? The,
that was the chiaroscuro part of different
oh,
cloud formations, light and shadows, but it was what it was concentric field perception, and it's a fairly complicated idea to talk about. But what it does is, now take a look at a little pinhole here. So if you were looking at a painting through this pinhole, then you'd be looking at a certain part of the painting. Well, everything you change in that pinhole is going to change everything else around here. So when you expand it, then your mind has to take a look at everything around here. And then when you're looking at the frame, then it becomes hugely dynamic. So as you're working it and thinking it, I would look at it 5 times longer than painting because I had to concentrate on it. And so what he taught me, and interesting enough, my fiance had the same mentor, and she's a world-class artist, an abstract artist. And so it's a confirmation that he, as a mentor for us, he didn't have that many mentees. This was just a crazy coincidence that we both had the same mentor.
right.
So she was in New York 3 years after I was in New York. And so the interesting part of it now is in our relationship, our painting or that experience will be part of our lives going forward in a big way. And I've told everybody in my company that that's what I'm going to do too. And they're cool with it because I said that, look, when I tune in to the painting, I'm going to be tuned into inventing. So it's good for everybody that I'm going to be doing this. And that's an interesting part about the board being able to say, okay, we back you. And most boards would say, no, man, you got to focus in on the company and run,
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. But I have questions. I'm gonna come back to the artist thing, but we were just about to tell me about an art breakthrough.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
It was very exciting. So when I went to New York, then Katz, who was the director of Parsons, we had a fantastic little meeting when I first came into town. And so for the first time, he assigned me with 2 artists, Alan Sonfest and Agnes Dennis. And I give Agnes a tremendous amount of credit because first thing she did when we first met was, I don't want you to do any of your art. I want you to read this philosophy, this series of books that she gave me. And that was pretty amazing. So I just crammed on the philosophy. And then when I was doing the painting, the painting was Organopolis, and I first started Organopolis. I actually have the original of all the paintings that got burned in the home fire. I have the original, and then I have the breakthrough. And here's where it was important. The breakthrough was a mathematical decomposition of the spatial relationships that are part of the Organopolis structure. So Organopolis was more than an abstract piece because it was elements of bodies and it was elements of shapes. So your mind looked at it in a more complex way.
So like looking like at a prism kind of thing? Or?
Well, what it was a tease of figure ground relationships. So the longer you looked at it, certain things would flip in your mind.
Okay.
And so what I did on the mathematical decomposition is that I created more distance of those illusions or those sequence of the mind's process. So I decoded it by 4 colors, and then what I would do is change those. What it did was it forced something that was in the back into the front, or this is the shape. Here's Organopolis, and then it comes out, comes down, comes in, comes out, comes down, comes in. So mathematically deconstructing it, it was a fascinating study. And
Wow.
I'll send you a picture of both when I get home. So as I was doing this, then Alan, which we got along great. Alan was such a great guy. He actually had me do the drawings for his stuff. He had 81-man shows when I was working with him. Agnes had like 41-man shows. There was 3 biographies being written by, they were major artists and leaders in the conceptual movement.
Mhm.
So he took my diary, and that's where I was tying it back to Agnes. She told me, I want you to do a diary and write your ideas. So I would sketch on the subway, people in the subway, because the subway would do this. They would
Mhm.
just try to keep loose.
And sketching on the trail and so forth. We were talking about that. Um,
Yeah, it was. It came from Agnes Dennis. I have a tremendous amount of respect for. Agnes, well, Brooke Katz from Parsons had assigned me two artists, which is, I guess, the first time they'd done that. And it was with Alan Sonfest and Agnes Dennis. Well, Agnes, when I first came into her studio, had this huge wraparound of an anonymous shell. She decomposed the shell's dynamics and its curvature to create the world's longest non-repeating integer. She was amazingly brilliant. She was chess champion in Europe when she was 13 years old. And it was a tremendous mentor. So she had said, well, before you start doing your work, I'd like for you to read philosophy and have a sketchbook. So I had this little black sketchbook, and I would read, and then I would write before I go to bed, first thing in the morning, which was a nice practice. As a matter of fact, I had my classes when I was teaching. I had them incorporate that into their life.
So it's reading, and then
Yeah, because your art is with you wherever you go.
Right.
So
Okay.
I started to sketch on the subway, and it was fascinating because the subway's rocking all over the place, and sketches were actually quite interesting. But here's to the point: when I had a breakthrough on the Organopolis series, I had wrote down the theories in my sketchbook as I was painting it, so that the theories were coming through. And what the powerful part about it was, in the base part, which I'll show you, send to you, the first concept. It was the first real concept. I had a series of 7 rough concepts that I had put together first, but the first one that really came together was on some arches paper. It's really rather small. And I still have that from the fire, and I have the one that had the breakthrough of the fire. So I guess I'm very thankful for that. The painting shows where I first did the mathematical decomposition that was over top of the backtext. Backtext, the intriguing part of it, even in its first design, is elements of figures, but the longer you look at it, the mind will change its spatial relationships. So what I was trying to do is make the piece alive, so that in a longer viewing, if you really should study it, and basically the piece comes alive in its experience with it. So to enhance that, then I put a mathematical decomposition of the structure that was backtext painting onto the surface, and it would come out on a bevel, forward, back in, back, and a bevel, forward, back in, and it had codes and it had stripes. And so these shapes, I would have different colors, codes, and sometimes it would reinforce a foreground element. Sometimes it would reinforce a background element. So it had a direct relationship to the original spatial relationships.
if two individuals look at that, will they see the same thing, or
Probably not.
or it's designed to be seen in a more subjective way?
Yeah, if it's an experienced artist, then they'll get into it and it'll be something because their mind is used to being tuned into a piece of art. And for a lay person, I'd probably have to describe what I'm trying to do first before they start to get it. That's a good question. Here's the interesting thing. Alan Sonfest took my studies and this piece over to Leo Castelli. But Leo Castelli is one of the top 2 galleries in the world, very famous. It was quite an honor. Jasper Johns was one of his artists, historical artists, major historical artists. So he left my diary there and paintings for a little while, still working on his stuff. Well, I think it was about 4.5 years, 5 years later. Maybe it was sooner than that. On the cover of Art in America was Jasper Johns. And guess what was on the cover? It was my theory, exactly. So it was the stripes were identical, and then they hit the article on him. They actually had pictures of his diary. He says it was his diary. It was my diary.
Wow.
It word says. Why?
Was it word for word?
Visual to visual.
Visual to visual.
Complete
Wow.
stealing. But it's okay. I never did anything about it because Jasper Johns is I have a lot of respect for. He's one of my favorite artists. And here's the guy that just stole from me. So it's okay.
According to our mutual friend, Alfredo Versace, you're only doing stuff other people stealing from you, right?
Well, that's Alfredo. I love Alfredo. Yes. Alfredo is amazing.
Yes.
So here's the point, though, in terms of our conversation, is what's inside of me when I went to New York and I got this kind of feedback and I got this kind of support from Ohio State and I got this kind of support from Burt Katz, the director of Parsons, and these two artists. Agnes offered me a 2-man show with her at the Whitney, and Alan got another show with me for a 1-man show at Rauschenberg. Why didn't do any of that? They just did it, okay? So what it means for AdTechs and what we're doing, remember I told you,
Yes.
I'm not concerned about competition.
Right.
It doesn't bother me if I'm on a different path, okay?
Right.
So I think that's important because an inventor, especially in a startup company, has to be able to believe very deeply in what I'm doing. Because in a leader position, the team has to believe in what I'm doing. Okay, the company has to believe in what I'm doing.
Single division.
Exactly.
Right.
And what it is, it's a humbling single division. I mean, the leadership style to me is to be able to tune into what every person in the company, what is their motivations, what is important to them. So individually, I try to motivate, so it's internal motivation. And that in essence, the company is exciting itself. But if you go deeper into the organizational relationships with the people and develop a culture, when you can develop that culture at a startup, it's really important to sustain that culture, that belief. So my belief is in the honor and the belief in the people that believe in me and believe in what we're doing. That's really significant. So I want to always have that culture. It's respect for each other. It's the fact that if you make a mistake, no problem, man. Just let's talk about it. Let's all figure it out. Let's fix it.
So in AdTechs, recognize it, right? AdTechs.
Yes.
Company, your kind of recruitment style in terms of the type of person that you're looking for inside. Well, outside of some of the values that you just mentioned there, what other qualities would someone have to come with this?
Well, it's pretty amazing because each person that's associated, which is probably 38, 40 people that are really engaged with, they're among the leaders in their field. I'm very honored. And Dr. Monami is considered one of the leading concussion and head trauma experts in the country. Dr. Trickman was voted the top award for orthopedic surgeons in the state of Ohio. He also got an award for the best business doctor accomplishments, so on and so forth. My engineers, the dean of industrial design, it's just honored in their relationship and how excited they are and what they're doing. So when I'm looking to it, I'm looking for self-motivated people and people that are accomplished in their fields, but I want to take it to the next level. I want them to be really excited about this. They can use their mind and they can be contributors. The culture in the company is sustainable innovation. So I'm encouraging innovation with everybody.
So it's sort of like a big think tank.
That's right.
Of minds inside. And you don't have to be the brightest one in the room.
By far, I'm not. These guys are really special. Yeah.
That was a smart strategy, right? I think some of the top companies, I think even like Steve Jobs and people, that's sort of the method that they work with, right?
That's right.
Putting extremely smart people around them. And
the doctor enables me to
in essence, be supposed to be an expert, but it's a social science and it's on leadership. So the doctor is in organizational leadership. There's got a great deal of emphasis on research. So, you know, do peer-reviewed medical journal things in collaborations with the doctors, like the Dr. Monty and I would write a peer-reviewed article on the invention that I told you about with people that have a tendency to fall in their recovery, and how that text with a full body suit using intelligence, natural intelligence, I can see the device can see where the impact is, where is the threat of impact before it occurs. So the point is that I don't think I could do this without the doctorate experience. And let's just take it all in a picture. I don't think I could do this without the New York experience. I don't think I could do this without the Hollywood experience. So these experiences all lead to what we're trying to do.